Here is Geraldo Rivera on Fox News this morning.
Should be investigated to the fullest extent of the law, and if he is criminally liable, he should be prosecuted. But I am urging the parents of Black and Latino youngsters particularly to not let their children go out wearing hoodies. I think the hoodie is as much responsible for Trayvon Martin's death as George Zimmerman was.
What do you mean?
When you see a kid walking, Juliet, when you see a kid walking down the street, particularly a dark-skinned kid like my son Cruz, who I constantly yelled at when he was going out wearing a damn hoodie or those pants around his ankles, take that hood off. People look at you and what do they think? What's the instant identification? What's the instant association? It's those crime scene surveillance tapes. Every time you see someone sticking up a 7-Eleven, the kid's wearing a hoodie. When you see a Black or Latino youngster, particularly on the street, you walk to the other side of the street. You try to avoid that confrontation. Trayvon Martin's, God bless him, he's an innocent kid, a wonderful kid, a box of Skittles in his hand. He didn't deserve to die, but I'll bet you money, if he didn't have that hoodie on, that nutty neighborhood watch guy wouldn't have responded in that violent and aggressive way.
This is a classic example of a reporter injecting himself into the story. And Geraldo Rivera, well, there's nobody better than that. His take was so far off the mark, his own son objected. Rivera tweeted, "My own son just wrote to say he's ashamed of my position on hoodies. I still feel parents must do whatever they can to keep their kids safe." In an effort to create a unique take on the Trayvon Martin case, Geraldo Rivera has made a ridiculous comment. He's handing George Zimmerman an absurd defense. To offer up the idea that Trayvon Martin was killed because of the clothes that he was wearing is absolutely outrageous. But there's more. Here's what Sean Hannity said about the case.
Could this be a terrible tragedy? Could this just be, a case where Trayvon was running because he thought he was in jeopardy? He was in the neighborhood. It was and we had a series of crimes. So we have a community watch. Is it possible that it was just a horrible accident?
It could be. I mean, Sean, certainly the defense is going to come forward and say that this is it's a tragedy. Obviously, he misunderstood. Zimmerman thought that he was in fear of his life.
I mean, this is a tragedy. This young man. We just don't know if it was an accident or if this was somehow intentional. We don't know.
We do know that he wasn't doing anything wrong.
We do know that. We know he had no weapons. He had Skittles and a phone.
Hannity says that we don't know if it was an accident or if it was intentional. Yes, we do know. Even the shooter doesn't claim it was an accident. Here's George Zimmerman on the 911 call.
Are you following him? Yeah. Okay, we don't need you to do that. Okay.
Well, that doesn't sound like an accident to me. How about you, Sean? Does that sound like an accident? Zimmerman followed Trayvon Martin against the order of the dispatcher. Here's another 911 call from one of the neighbors.
So you think he's yelling help?
Yes.
All right, what is your number?
There's gunshots.
There's someone screaming. I just heard gunshots.
There's a Black guy down. It looks like he's been shot and he's dead.
Here is the girlfriend's account of what happened that night.
So I said, what you following me for? And the next time I said, what you doing around here? Somebody push Trayvon because the head said this down.
George Zimmerman actually told police that he was attacked from behind as he was walking back to his truck. Everything we have heard contradicts that, and no one is claiming it was an accident. For Sean Hannity to even suggest that the killing was an accident shows a total disregard for the facts and a complete lack of respect for the family. There is another take on this story today from LeBron James and the Miami Heat, the NBA. James tweeted this picture of the team wearing hoodies with their heads bowed. Today, students at the Arthur Ashe Middle School in Florida made a formation of the letters TM. This story is a long way from being over. Get your cell phones out. I want to know what you think. Tonight's question: was the shooting of Trayvon Martin just a horrible accident? Text A for yes, text B for no to 622-639. And you can always go to our blog at ed.msnbc.com. We'll bring you the results later on in the show. I'm joined tonight by Ta-Nehisi Coates, senior editor for The Atlantic, and Michael Eric Dyson, MSNBC political analyst and Georgetown University professor. Gentlemen, thanks for being here with us tonight here in New York on this story. Ta-Nehisi, what about what Geraldo Rivera said?
Well, I think it's interesting. We've always been told that guns don't kill, people kill. Now we're being told that hoodies kill. Apparently people don't. We all have talks, those of us who have children, particularly those of us who are African American, Latino, how they should conduct themselves out in public, how they should address the police, how they should address authority figures in general, how they should dress. That's one conversation you can have. That's very different than saying that's equally responsible for, at the same time, if somebody commits a crime against you. There's streets in my neighborhood that I might not go down because they aren't particularly well lit. But if I get held up on those streets, it's not my fault that I got held up. It doesn't excuse an actual crime.
How outrageous is it?
It's extraordinarily outrageous. It's an egregious affront to any civility that we have. Look, a hood and a hoodie, this is why LeBron James did it. This is why they have hoodie marches across this country. This is why rappers and entertainers and singers and other people are saying, look, we're going to dress in the hood. The Unabomber had a hood, but he was a white guy and he escaped notice. Millions of white people get up each morning to go to the gym wearing a hood. What's the problematic here is the association between race and criminality and the association between dark-skinned black men. Listen to what he said, that is Geraldo. A dark-skinned kid, he talks about his own son, and the association with that in criminality. As Ta-Nehisi has said, you can tell your kids, look, don't dress a certain way, don't look a certain way, don't speak to the police a certain way, be deferential, beyond principled deference, because your life is at stake here. That's only because the police have been so outrageous in their assault upon black people. It doesn't mean that dressing in a hoodie, innately is wrong. So, Ed, any take you have on this, the whole point is black people have been unduly and unfairly and unjustly assaulted and talked about in relationship to criminality, and clearly George Zimmerman sought this young kid out because he was a black man.
Did Geraldo Rivera do a disservice to all of this?
Extremely. He did a great disservice, because now he's trying to let the shooter off the hook. He's trying to absolve us of responsibility. It's like saying to black people in the 1950s, you know, the fact is that if you wouldn't act so belligerent, then the white people wouldn't treat you so horribly. No, the fact is that segregation and Jim Crow are real, and that regardless of how black people act, we should be treated with a certain set of decent practices in this country.
I just want to add, just if I can just jump on top of that too. He also did a disservice to the young man's parents. You have your son is dead. 3 weeks dead, and the way you address that is you should have dressed him better.
Right.
I mean, it's just ridiculous. You send your kid out to the corner store. He's dead. And what Geraldo has to say to this young man's parents is, it's your fault. It's equally your fault because you should have dressed him better. It's just an extremely callous thing to say.
What do you make of Hannity even suggesting that it was an accident?
I think accidents are still prosecutable. Right. You know, accidents happen all the time and people get prosecuted for them. That doesn't let the killer off at all.
Is this an example of it being in the talk culture for more than a week, a very intense subject, and here comes a talker trying to come up with a different take and steps in it?
Well, it's not only that, Ed. It's the fact that they were slow on the uptake to begin with.
Fox was.
The Fox was. They were not addressing this in a serious way, and then begrudgingly they've acknowledged that something egregious has happened here, and so now they're trying to come up with an excuse. And the horrible thing about this is that they're coming up with all kinds of excuses because they still disbelieve the fact that this kid could be innocent.
All right, I want to play. This is the president today. It's gotten into presidential politics now. The president was announcing the head of the World Bank today, the candidate for that, and of course he was asked a question about it. Here's his response.
I think all of us have to do some soul searching to figure out how does something like this happen, and that means that we examine the laws and the context for what happened, as well as the specifics of the incident. But my main message is to the parents of Trayvon Martin. You know, if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon.
That, of course, drew a reaction from one of the Republican candidates, Newt Gingrich.
What the president said, in a sense, is disgraceful. It's not a question of who that young man looked like. At some point, we got to talk about being Americans, and we got to talk about when things go wrong to an American, it is sad for all Americans. And trying to turn it into a racial issue is fundamentally wrong.
Yeah, and
I really find it appalling.
Ta-Nehisi, what do you think?
Well, I think the implicit message that Newt Gingrich is sending is that because it's a racial issue, it's therefore not for all Americans. I don't understand that at all. I think all Americans should be concerned about racial issues. What the president said is obviously true. If you listen to the tape, George Zimmerman cited him as a young African-American. If you look at the reporting that's been done going up to over the past 3 weeks, there have been other incidents where George Zimmerman has been accused of
calling the cops 46 times since January 1st of 2011.
Yes.
What about Gingrich? What about the president?
He's outrageous. The president, I think, was right on target. He acknowledged that this was a problem. He said we should all do some soul searching, but then he took a chance to inform the nation, to use this as a teachable moment to say, look, I, as an African-American man, would have had if I had a son, he would look like him, and therefore, what that means is that I'm the president of the United States of America. My son could look just like him, be wearing a hood, not a thief, not a thug, not a criminal, and could be subject to the arbitrary exercise of lethal force let George Zimmerman exercise against Trayvon Martin. It's outrageous what Newt Gingrich did.
And I want to take a look again at this picture of the Miami Heat. When was the last time we have seen athletes at this level make a statement like this? What are they saying, Michael?
They are saying we identify with him. That could have been us. That could have been my son, LeBron is saying. Dwayne Wade is saying that could have been my son. Or it could have been me. I could have been walking on the wrong side of the street at a certain time in a gated community that I own a house in, where I own a late model car, and I could have been subject to the same thing.
Ta-Nehisi, how do we move forward from this? How do we just push this forward?
Well, that depends on what comes out. I think we keep following the story. I think we try to keep our heads on our shoulders. And I think we don't let ourselves get too distracted by people who are obviously just trying to score a few political points or looking for something to say when there's nothing to be said.
Ta-Nehisi Coates, Michael Eric Dyson, great to have you with us tonight. Thanks so much. Remember to answer the question there at the bottom of the screen tonight. We want to have you share your thoughts with us on Twitter @EdShow. Tens of thousands rallied in Sanford, Florida last night, and officials are responding to the pressure. Reverend Al Sharpton led the demonstration. He will join me next. And later, the right wing's radical agenda on women's health care is taking its toll. Top officials at the Susan G. Komen Foundation resigned. Donations are down. The woman who predicted this was all going to happen, Terry O'Neill, will join me. Stay with us. You're watching The Ed Show on MSNBC.